enable.
Dreams these days come with a very heavy price tag, whether it's buying a car, buying a house, funding your children's education, or a cushy retired life. All these objectives are not easy to achieve for the average salaried person. So, how does one go about funding their goals and aspirations? Well, that's where we come in. Hello and welcome to NSE FinWiz Season 5, powered by CNBC TV 18, where we help you understand the nuances of financial planning and money management. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan, and today we are at the headquarters of one of the leading adhesives players in India, Pidilite.
Fevicol was born in 1959 and soon it became the most popular adhesive. From households to industries, brand Pidilite over the years has become a name to reckon with. Their products range from adhesives, sealants, waterproofing solutions and construction chemicals to arts and crafts. Pidilite has been a pioneer when it comes to strengthening bonds with people from all walks of life. And today, NSE FinWiz, with its theme, Dream On, engaged the employees at Pidilite in Mumbai to understand their thoughts on financial planning and wealth creation.
I think financially it's very important that after a given age, you have enough funds to live your life. Now that is where I believe that these various kinds of instruments or financial investments will help us.
I dream of achieving financial independence maybe by the age of 40. I think by the age of 40 I want to be financially independent, since I don't want to be dependent on my primary job as the only source of income for me. And after 40 I want to go ahead and explore other passions which I have cultivated over time, maybe writing or teaching or something like that, which I can, after 40 I can pursue.
My long-term goal is to retire at an early age, maximum amount of work for another 5 to 8 years, that's it, and be in a position to travel around and enjoy life.
Long-term goal, basically I want a corpus of 4 to 5 crore at the end of my active service life. I am looking for 2 lakh rupees per month after completing my active service life.
Welcome to NSE FinWiz, powered by CNBC TV 18. Today we will be discussing everything one needs to know for a sufficiently rich retirement, and to help us understand and build that roadmap for a carefree retirement, we have with us two experts in the field, with Mr. Hemant Rustage, who's the CEO of Wise Invest Advisors, and Mr. Firoz Aziz, Deputy CEO at Anand Rathi Private Wealth Management. All right, retiring rich, that's an interesting topic to ask questions on, because there are so many dynamics at play. So let's start with the basics. Hemant, what is the ideal age and circumstance to start saving for a rich retirement, and what are the mistakes to avoid in your opinion?
Well, ideally one should start investing for retirement as soon as you begin to work. But, at that stage of life, nobody thinks about retirement. That's the last priority, because everyone thinks that, okay, I've just started working, let me enjoy my money for some time. I mean, why worry about retirement, which is going to be like 35 years away from today? So I think it's very, very important that you start investing early. Second important thing is that you invest in the right asset class. Invest in options which are very tax efficient. Now what happens is you invest for 25 years and every year you're paying tax. For example, you put money in bank deposit. Every year you need to show interest in your return and you pay tax on that. Invest in asset class like equity, which has the potential to grow, and the return after 1 year is tax-free. So I think these are three important things that everyone needs to focus on, especially when you're investing for retirement.
Arriving at that base calculation for retirement expenses, when somebody sits and tries to calculate how much do I need in my account to have a comfortable retirement, what are some of the factors they should be? How should they arrive at that calculation in your opinion?
See, if you're trying to compute what's the kind of money you would need at a point in time for the specific goal, that automatically means that for every 10 years, you will have to double the money needed. For example, if you need an X amount of money today, which is not very difficult to ascertain because you know what the goal is going to cost you today. 10 years from now, you will need twice. 20 years from now, you will need 4 times. And 30 years from now, you will need 8 times. So double it every 10 years. So in 30 years, it actually becomes 8 times. 2 to the power 3. That's point 1. Point 2, when you're saving for very, very important goals, like education, for example, of your child. Now, when you're thinking of inflation of this nature, it might not be right to look at 7%. You will have to find out the customized inflation for that specific goal. In India, education is inflated. Education expense has inflated at 11%. So I might assume it is 7, but you might end up that this specific goal needed 11. Especially for child's education, I have seen several people falling short of the money which they saved for because they didn't envisage the inflation which was going to be factored in. And that should not be 7, that should be 11. That's the second point on inflation which I would like to make.
What's the ideal asset allocation mix for someone who's about to start, who's in a mid-career phase, or who's about to retire? What's the ideal asset allocation mix, Feroz?
See, firstly, before we get to asset allocation, of what is asset allocation? Distributing your money to different assets is called asset allocation, right? Anything which you put your money and don't expect anything in return is not an asset, it is an expense. If I buy something and I expect it to give me back something, that's an asset. So there are 4 types of assets, 4 large assets, the rest of them are distractions: equity, real estate, deposits, and gold. If you are planning for your retirement, it is very, very important that you will have to propel your retirement corpus largely by equity. So 70 to 80% of the money has to be equity. Otherwise, you are anyway sure not to retire rich. So you would rather not taking the risk will become the risk in itself. So 80% of one's money set aside for retirement should at least be in equity, unless the retirement is just about 3 years, 4 years away. If it is anything superseding 5 years, you should have 80% of the money in equity. Gold and real estate have no place in a retirement corpus which you're trying to save. There are several reasons. Rather than elaborating on them, this is the output of it, that equity will be the largest propeller of retirement corpuses. Unfortunately, when it comes to mandatory retirement compulsions to all of us in the form of EPFs, employee provident funds, are largely skewed towards deposits, which is not the right way to invest for retirement. So you are having a compulsory retirement set aside, but that's set aside in the wrong asset. So 80% of your money, you will have to create that whole external force to move it to equity.
All right, on that note, we'll take a short break on the show. When we return, we'll be talking more about goal-based investing to retiring rich. Stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. Welcome back to NSE FinWiz Season 5, powered by CNBC TV 18. Now, in the previous segment, we discussed the various facets of retiring rich. In this segment, we'll be taking a deep dive on goal-based investing to achieve that objective. All right, let me start with you, Hemant, here. Should monthly income be prioritized over net worth? I was reading a paper on Harvard Business Review where they specifically mentioned that it's time that shift in thinking happens.
In general, when you talk about investment, I think it's very, very important that we follow a goal-based approach. You know, like everything else that we do in life, there has to be a plan. And when you decide goal-based investment approach, as I mentioned earlier, you decide which asset allocation, what kind of asset allocation will be ideal for you. So I think it's very, very important. So what happens is, if I've created a portfolio for each goal, and if my goal is child education, I'm only touching that money. I'm not touching my retirement money.
All right. And Feroz, how should one keep investing for the longer term goal when the shorter term needs appear stronger? Because that will always be a key point when it comes to the right kind of retirement planning. Your short term needs will always appear, and they'll always appear stronger than your longer term goal, especially if you're starting early. So how can someone who's starting their retirement planning journey and sees a lot of these short term needs coming up address that point?
People prioritize it on the basis of which comes first. rather than which is more important. So very importantly, you should give significance to the ones which nobody else can shoulder. And retirement, nobody else can shoulder. If you kept telling this to your mind, then automatically, subconsciously, you're not going to touch this corpus because there's nobody else going to rescue you in that situation. Second is, if you started computing not your expense today, but what is the reduction in the retirement corpus because of your short-term expense. For example, if I have my goal 20 years away, retirement, I have 20 years to retirement, and if I'm spending 10,000 rupees in a shopping mall, for example, falling prey to all this sales and marketing activity, then if I know that if I spend 10,000 rupees, my retirement corpus is going to come down by 1,60,000 rupees. Then it is going to hurt me because that's the math. If I can grow my money at 15%, if I remove 10,000 from my retirement corpus today, my retirement corpus is going to come down by not 10,000 but 1,60,000. Then you're going to be able to bifurcate your most important short-term expenses at the cost of the long-term expenses.
Saving tax, it's one of the key priorities of retirement planning investments. You know, you've got EPF, PPF, SCSS, NSE, and a whole lot of options. How do you navigate this maze in a tax-efficient way? Give us some insights on tax planning. What's your view on this?
So I think make tax saving a part of your overall investment plan. Take care of your compulsory payments and then see what is left and invest that money according to the asset allocation that you have decided for your goals.
All right. Now, before we go to questions from the audience, one last question to you, Firoz. We touched upon mutual funds earlier in our conversation. What are some of the good options to keep in a retirement portfolio? If you could give us some basic pointers for people to understand what kind of mutual funds work best in a retirement portfolio.
In the mutual fund category, if it is retirement, what is the asset I need to choose? Like Hemant said, equity is going to be the largest component. In equity, there are several funds. Fortunately, there is not too much you need to do. There are about 10 categories of funds, even on the equity side. But you need to only focus on 2 or 3 categories: large cap, mid cap, and multi cap. These are the 3 categories which you need to focus on, because there are 460 odd equity mutual funds, out of which I will have to pick 2, 3, or at best 5. So it's a tedious task of making sure that you're choosing the right 1% of funds in your portfolio. So make sure that you remove the distraction and know which are the categories you're focusing on. That will take you 80-90% home. So large cap, mid cap, and multi cap. This will shrink your universe by half. In that, there are very easily comprehensible evaluation methods which are given in the form of stars. Even if you went to a money control, for example, to make it very, very comprehensive, they are expressed, their goodness is expressed in the form of stars, which is for everyone, for us to understand, 5 stars being the maximum, 1 being the least. So if you chose 5-star funds in these 3 categories, I think more or less you will be okay for a retirement.
All right. It's time now to shift focus to the audience. What's going to happen is I'm going to call out your name and you're going to list out your goal, which you've specified in the cue cards given. And our experts are going to try and help you plan to achieve that goal. All right. The first name I will be calling out is Rahul Valecha.
My goal is to have a luxury apartment by the age of 35. I'm currently 25. I am a risk-averse investor, and the amount I can save is around 35,000-40,000 per month. At max 50,000 on a very stretched basis.
Every goal that you set, as I mentioned to you, there has to be a target. You need to decide, how much this luxury apartment is going to cost you. Okay? And now you have, let's say, 10 to 12 years to buy that. Now, obviously, for 10 to 12 years, you can invest in equity funds. There is no issue on that because you'll be investing every month, even though there is going to be a lot of volatility. But the fact that you're investing in a disciplined manner, the volatility is taken care of. So if you quantify that number, based on a return of, let's say, 12 to 15%, we need to work backwards as to how much money is to be invested. Okay? So unless and until we know what is the number we're talking about, I can't really tell you whether 50,000 is going to be enough or not. That's one thing. The second is, while it's important to have a goal like this, you also need to make sure in the next 10 years, what are the other goals going to be there for you? Have you kept enough money for those? Keeping focus on one goal means you will be ignoring other goals. Sometimes we have to differentiate between aspirations and a realistic goal.
All right, moving on to our next audience member, Mr. Milan Deshpande, if you could get up from the Resin division.
I would like to ask regarding the money or the corpus I need to accumulate for having a comfortable retirement.
Can you tell us more details about how much you...
The retirement is in another 3 years, and I would aspire to have at least 3 crores.
3 years actually is a very short period for you to build a corpus. And as you mentioned that you built only 30% of the corpus that you require after retirement. So which means that if you require a corpus of 3 crore, you have a corpus of 1 crore already with you. So obviously, when you are looking to generate a corpus of 2 crore in 3 years, it's not going to be possible for you. I can be sure about that, because it will require a huge amount of investment for you. Now, what you need to really see now, what best can be done? You have 3 more years to go. Okay, you need to really sit and work out how much money are you investing. Is there scope for you to invest more now? And you also need to look at the composition of your portfolio, exactly where your money is invested today.
It's time now for another short break, but when we return, the audience takes over, quizzing our experts on any questions that they might have on retiring rich. Keep watching CNBC TV 18. Welcome back. You're watching NSE FinWiz Season 5, powered by CNBC TV 18. Now, we have been addressing questions related to retiring rich and goal-based investing. In this segment, the final segment, the audience gets the opportunity to ask any questions that they have to our panel of experts on the topic of retiring rich. So the floor is open to all of you here at the offices of Pidilite. So let's see who has a question to ask our experts. Go ahead and raise your hands if you have a question to ask.
Hello, myself Rajesh. I work in the finance department. The query which I want to ask is whether I'm investing in debt mutual funds, whether I should invest in debt mutual funds or invest in GSEC directly.
Now the point again is that, are you looking at creating a diversified portfolio? How much time you have to kind of look at your own investment, and for what purpose are you investing? Okay, these are GSECs are not basically short-term investment. So when you're looking at, let's say, for 5-year or 10-year investment, you have different options to look at. Now, for example, you can look at equity. If you don't want everything to go into equity, you have hybrid funds in the mutual fund. You have a new breed of funds today which invests in equity, arbitrage, and debt, which is a fantastic product. Now, it invests in a manner that equity and arbitrage become 65%. So the tax, is applicable of an equity fund. At the same time, you're not taking too much of a risk. So I think it's not necessary that when we talk about investing in debt, it has to be necessarily in debt fund. It can be in different forms.
One last question before we wrap up.
Akhil Duggal, and my query is when one is selecting any mutual fund, what would be the top 2-3 key parameters that as a beginner one should look into?
There's about 150 fund managers in the country. Okay, so understanding who are the right fund managers, we have to go beyond the name of the fund. We are too caught up with the name of the fund. But there's a human being behind the scene who has named the fund himself or herself. So it's important to understand who's the fund manager. There are about 150 fund managers, out of which 15 fund managers across their schemes over long periods of time have delivered very well. And doing some homework on them will help you understand which fund manager to choose. Then the universe comes down significantly. And then if you superimpose the 5-star rating, which is there available in public domain, that encompasses 2-3 parameters already, that should suffice. It is, unfortunately, investors only look at return, but it's not about the return, it's about how much risk you took to deliver the returns.
Thank you so much for asking your questions. On that note, we'll wrap up this episode of NSE FinWiz. I'd like to thank Hemant and Firoz for joining us and providing their insights on the topic of retiring rich, and also to the audience members here at Pidilite headquarters for their spirited Q&A. We hope you managed to learn to make money in a better and more efficient way. Stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. We'll be back.
I had been investing wrong way, so I had my allocation more towards debt and into GSEC. So from this session I came to I should actually allocate to equity, which would help me out to reach my goals.
It was quite informative because quite a lot of us had several queries which they didn't know whom to ask. So if you try to read up stuff on the internet, you will find so many opinions that you won't know which to believe. So it is always important if you can have some specific queries and have the experts face to face to ask them.
I already had some plans which I used to invest just for the sake of tax investments. But now that we have got different insights from the same, I have a little bit of insights of it which I would like to go and invest myself in equity markets.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.